I've just been asked to chair. I'm Mike Grenville from Transition Forest Row in Sussex, write the Transition Network newsletter, and so I'm going to try and chair and bring the audience in and bring out lots of ideas about what do we mean by resilience, which has become the new sort of buzzword. So I'm going to go through the speakers, the panelists that we have this afternoon, and then I'll be asking them to separately then to define what we mean by resilience and what their aspect take is on that, and we'll move on from there to look at the different aspects of resilience, community resilience, individual resilience, and so on. So starting first on my left, in fact everybody's on my left, so makes that easy, is Patrick Whitefield, who is a permaculture teacher, known to many of you. Claire Milne, who is a community activist from Bristol, been involved in transition for a long time in food projects, and tells me that she was the inspiration behind the Tesco riots. Never trust a journalist. And Rob Hopkins from Transition Network, and Mark Heley, who is writing a book about resilience is fertile. Thank you. Mark Heley, I'm sorry. What did I say?
Sorry?
What did I say? Seeley. I know somebody else called Mark Hersey, that's why, sorry. Mark Heley, beg your pardon. So we can just go along, and then the first thing is really, I think, is to define what do we mean. What does the word resilience itself mean? So let's have see if we can get perhaps some different versions of what we actually mean by resilience.
Okay, can you hear me? No. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, okay. Right, well, as the sort of the representative of permaculture and the land, I'd like to start with sort of an ecological description, and we'll see how we can translate that into human affairs or into human ecology, from sort of ecology as the science of ecology. There was some very interesting experiments done once in native prairie in North America, comparing areas of natural prairie that had more or less diversity in them. And one interesting thing they found was that actually the areas where there was more diversity were more productive, and that's really because there were more different plants doing different things. Some had deep roots, some had shallow roots, some would be in leaf early in the season, some in leaf late in the season. So they were doing more different things. They were making better use of the resource base available. But what was even more interesting was when they had the worst drought for 50 years. And what they found, they were measuring the productivity of these different plots, different levels of diversity in these different natural plots. And they found that the ones that had the most diversity in them actually recovered the worst drought in 50 years more quickly. What they meant by recovered was that they got back to their pre-drought level of productivity more quickly. And that's what we mean by resilience. Well, there are lots of different definitions of resilience, but one of them is the ability to recover from a trauma, to bounce back. And what that meant was that where you get relatively low level of diversity, normally what you get is a small number of plant species which are very good at working under average conditions or ideal conditions. But where you get more diversity, you also get some that are good actually at working in suboptimal conditions. Some that can survive drought, some that can survive cold temperatures, some that can survive insect attack. And so those ones are there ready to take up the slack as soon as the ones that normally do the majority of the production start to lose. So diversity, I think, has an enormous part to play in resilience.
Okay, thank you. So Claire, diversity means resilience.
Thank you, Patrick. It's interesting because listening to what Patrick was saying, for me, kind of what I wanted to bring to the discussion around what resilience is really looking at personal resilience. And I think you can echo pretty much everything that Patrick's been saying in terms of us as human beings. And I think that one of the huge things that we've kind of lost as a society is that nature connection, and realising that everything that we need to learn is there modelled for us in nature. And that's been a real journey that I've been on, and it feels ironic in a way that I'm here, and the angle I want to take on resilience is around that personal resilience, because for me my journey has been very much coming from a place as soon as I was old enough to really conceptualise things, of being so obsessed with making a difference and feeling like, it was always about making a difference to other people. And I've always had quite a bugbear around navel gazing and kind of this whole kind of just work it out for yourself, and as long as you're okay, then then the rest of the world will be fine. Or well, you don't need to start doing that outer work until you've worked out your inner stuff. And I've always really struggled with that because it just always felt very selfish. And finally, I've actually got to a place where I feel like I've found the balance, and I've realised that actually it's got to be about both. Mac from Embercombe talks about the twin paths of leadership, and how we need to be working on both. We really need to be working on that inner work, because how can we really make any sort of impact on changing the outer world if everything going on inside us is chaos? But equally, it can't be. We are so connected. Again, looking to nature, everything is so connected. So we can't just be looking at our own inner development and not thinking about the outer world. So for me, I guess, again, with my journey, it's been so much about looking at why is it that we don't make these changes? I mean, any rational person kind of knows that actually the changes that we're all talking about really are so beneficial to us, and we know that. And whether you want to look at it from the beneficial perspective or from a fear perspective of, gosh, we've got to do it anyway, the reality is we kind of know that there's so much sort of sense that we need to make these changes. So why is it that we're all not stepping up? What is it that's stopping us from really making these changes that we know are so sensible and so obvious? And for me, that's what resilience is about. It's about us realising that for us to be able to come from a place to be able to make those changes, we need that inner resilience, and we need to be doing that work on ourselves. And again, one of the sort of realisations I've been having a lot recently is that we're not going to fail to step up to these immense challenges because we can't grow enough food or we can't house ourselves. It's because we're not going to be able to get on with each other and make these changes happen. And that's about inner resilience, that we learn enough about ourselves and we undo the damage that has been done collectively by the last sort of few decades, half century of consumerism, that has made us believe that our well-being comes from external things, when in actual fact it's within us. So for me, it's really about us taking on that journey of recognising that we are the big barriers to actually making that change, and that we've got to do that kind of work on ourselves to really own that stuff and make those steps to really try and be able to play a really important role, vital role in changing the world for everyone. Because we're all here, sat very privileged to be here, and there is so much suffering going on around the world by people who aren't as lucky. But it's us that we've got to take up that lead, and we've really got to make those changes, and we can only do that if we find that resilience within ourselves, that we can let go of the creature comforts that consumerism has addicted us to in such an extreme way. So I guess for me the theme of what I want to bring to this discussion really is that how do we become those elders that we're all feeling are so lacking, because we're in a society that feels so damaged and brings with it so much heaviness in that way that's stopping us from being that amazing inspiration for younger people. So how do we work on ourselves and collectively to kind of let go of that shadow, so that we can really step into these amazingly positive changes that are going to change everything for everyone?
Thank you, Claire. So Mac is actually, I think, speaking here at 5 o'clock. I think, is that right? 5 o'clock? Yep. Yeah. Speaking here later on. So inner transition, we've had in nature and inner transition. Rob, how can you add to that?
I think the thing that's really important to remember about resilience is unlike sustainability, where sustainability is presented as being an inherently good thing, that actually resilience isn't necessarily something which is always a good thing. It depends on the question: resilient to what? So actually, the way the government look at resilience is actually, if you're talking about being resilient to pandemics and terrorism, then you bring in all kinds of different things in order to introduce that ability to be more resilient to those shocks, which might not necessarily be very desirable things. So from a transition perspective, we would argue that the key things we need to be resilient to are peak oil and climate change and what's happening economically. And there was a report that was done by the World Economic Forum a couple of months ago, which was a paper produced for all the world governments, saying what they felt were the key risks over the next 10 years in terms of likelihood of them happening and the impact on the economy, and those were the three key issues. So if we're going with that and we're saying that those are the three things we need to be building resilience to, then actually what we need to be doing, I think, are very, very different to if we're talking about pandemics and global computer hacking or whatever. Resilience is looked at in lots of different ways, community resilience and personal resilience, as Claire was saying, ecological resilience, as Patrick was saying. But the things that are common to all of those, firstly, is around the importance, as Patrick was saying, of diversity, the tightness of feedback, so that the impacts of what we do, we experience them more closely to home. We're able to take more ownership of the things that we do. And I can't remember the third one at all. But anyway, there are three of them. Tightness of feedback, diversity, and it's been a very long day. So I suppose, yeah, for me, it's really, I think that if you read the government stuff about resilience and about being prepared for shocks and documents that are coming out about it, very little of it is framed in that context of peak oil and climate change. And it's something that's only been over the last 2 or 3 years through the work of Transition Network, but also other organisations in Canada and Australia and so on, who've really been looking at those, using the lens of peak oil, climate change, localization to look at resilience through, that some of the most fascinating stuff is starting to come through, I think. And it's been really interesting during that period to see more and more how that concept of resilience has become talked about more and more and more. But in the same way that you can have a good kind of localization, which is what we've been talking about, which is based on community ownership and low carbon and so on and so on, you could also have an absolutely, history is littered with ghastly, hideous versions of localization, which are run by some brutal feudal landlord and everybody rolls around in the mud on their behalf, and it's all really quite horrible. You can actually have resilience by itself isn't necessarily a good thing, but I think what we've really tried to develop is to say that building community resilience could actually be the economic and personal and cultural reimagining and reinventing of the places that we live. Where I live in Totnes, you look back in the 1950s and 60s, we had 3 commercial market gardens in the centre of that town that were owned by local people, supplied local shops. And now most of that food is bought in supermarkets, to the supermarkets in big lorries. Putting that back would have all kinds of beneficial impacts. And I think that's the way we need to frame resilience, and the things we need to do to become more resilient have a huge range of benefits that otherwise we don't have.
Okay, thank you. So so governments, the role governments play, but that also goes right down to local government. I know our parish council is starting to say, actually, we're only tasked to look at floods, really, but we can now look at other things as well.